right, we move on. Our next panel, our next session today actually is a really important one. And I should know really because it's my life's passion. And yes, it's on mastering public speaking, empowering leaders to inspire and influence. Our speaker today is really special. Alan Patching, Director of Industry Engagement and Professor of Construction and Project Management at Bond University. Alan combines extensive expertise in business and in human behavior. With a background as project director and CEO for Sydney Olympic Stadium and experience in high-profile property deals, Alan excels in strategic planning and complex negotiations. Additionally, Alan is skilled in counseling, in hypnotherapy, in psychotherapy, and he holds a PhD from Bond University and a master's in counseling and psychotherapy practice from Bath Spa University. Wow, if only all our resumes could read like this. A session I'm definitely not going to miss. Please join me in welcoming Professor Alan Patching.
Thank you very much. What a wonderful MC. I think one of the best I've ever worked with. Look, first of all, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me to this very important event to spend 30 minutes with you. So I've got till 1:45. And I'd like to start off by just hoping that every one of you, each and every one of you, has as good a time in Australia, in my country, as I always have when I visit your country. And that's always extraordinarily welcoming and friendly. One of the things I learned from my many visits to India is that Indians and Australians share a special language. We share a language that's common to both countries. And I'm not going to say that English is primarily that language, and nor is Hindi. The special language we share above all others is cricket. That's just the way it is. See, look at the reaction right up front. Well, I have to put in a plug for our university. We're a very small university. We're premium, and we're famous for two things. The first thing we're famous for is in the last 20 years or so, we've been the only university that's rated 5 stars in Australia for 6 different levels of customer service. In other words, student satisfaction. And also for getting a high proportion of people employed quickly. But more importantly to this audience, of the 50 or 60 or 70, I don't know how many there are, universities in Australia, keep in mind there's at least 50 more. We have 11 people in the Australian cricket team. 2 of them, Usman Khawaja and Matthew Kuhneman, go to Bond University. One doing an MBA and one doing, believe it or not, a Masters of Property Development. So cricket's a big thing, sport generally for us, just as it is in India. And I think that's a common language with a lot of people, as the Olympics recently showed. But now let's get on with the topic. I'm going to talk about, we discussed several topics for me to address, but the one that came up as that people have concerns with public speaking. That doesn't surprise me. In America, in a study done back in the 80s, public speaking was the #1 fear in the world. Death was the 4th fear. So people actually would prefer to be in the coffin than giving the eulogy at the funeral. That's crazy, but it's a reality in so many countries. So let's see if we can help you out a bit with that. So I'm going to be looking at both the content and how to structure a speech to help you get through any nerves, etc. But first of all, I want to address one particular thing. I'm hoping to have 5 or 10 minutes at the end to finish with some NLP stuff. Let's start by addressing the huge elephant that's either in the room already or it's thundering towards it. And that is the reality that in business, nothing happens until someone sells something to someone else. But it's not just about the sale of an end product. It's the sale of ideas, the sale of concepts, the ability to sell someone the idea that the price you're offering for a block of land is a reasonable price for them and will still give you a profit at the end. The ability to sell to councils the concept of something new. The ability to sell to financiers, as our previous panel said, the fact that you have to go into a couple of additional costs to meet environmental and social demands, but there will be an outcome at the end. The fact that you have to sell your consultants to work with what you want. The fact that you have to convince your quantity surveyors that perhaps the pricing they're doing is a little bit conservative. And I'm a quantity surveyor. I know how conservative we can be. Most of you will know what quantity surveyors are. If you don't, the easiest definition of a quantity surveyor is an accountant who lost their sense of humour. So think of it in the context of them being very safe with numbers, and we have to present to them to get some sort of agreement on how those numbers will go. I could go on, because you know the rest, selling to the market. But every one of these things requires the ability to present, to speak in public. And I would suggest that anybody who is really held back by that is also going to be held back in their career path. Just as our previous panel said, if you're not going to face environmental issues in your designs and development, you'll be held up because you won't be in demand with the future market. So research shows that many people would rather be trampled by the elephant than give a single speech to a mice or one or two people in a room. So let's see if we can overcome those concerns, shall we? By a show of hands, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody here, who does have a fear of public speaking? If I asked them to come on their stage now, they wouldn't want to. Okay. So that's the ones who kind of 20%, 30% of the room are saying they do. The next question, who are the ones that have that fear of public speaking but are scared to put their hand up because I might ask them up here? Yeah, that's another 30, 40%. So the numbers are about the same. But let's see, even for those of you who are good public speakers, let's see if we can take you to the next level so that every time someone asks you to give a speech, you're not like a meerkat looking for all the scary things that could affect you. Reflection. Not a bad place to start. And the first place to start is most people consider the fear of public speaking to be a phobia. For most people, it's actually not. In my therapy practice dealing with business people for many, many years, I found that they'd say, we've got a fear of public speaking, and I'd ask one question. If the audience was facing the back of the room and not looking at you when you were speaking, would you feel any better about the presentation? And 80% of people would say, yeah, it wouldn't be a problem. Because it's not about their fear of speaking, it's about their fear of being judged. It's called social anxiety disorder. And that might be what you're dealing with. And I'm more than happy people can contact me. I've only got 30 minutes here and I'm going to be around until the flight leaves. But if anybody here wants to contact me and get some more information on this, by all means contact me through the university. I'll be happy to have a chat by phone. Whoops, I just messed something up. So fears are controlled by the limbic system of the brain, which is the brain stem. It's a part of the brain that works 24/7. It divides every experience we have in life from the time we were born into either something that's fearful and terrorizing or something that's safe. No in between. Safe or not safe. Simple as that. And it's really important to understand how it works, and we'll get to that in a minute. Now, a fear of public speaking from a certain extent comes from self-protection mechanisms built in, but for the most part they come from two things. One, you had a scary experience when speaking, or two, you've watched other people show fear of speaking when you were a kid, so you thought that was the right thing to develop. So they're the two normal things you can deal with. The second one's the hardest one to fix. If you were okay at speaking, something went wrong, and all of a sudden you were scared thereafter, that's pretty easy to therapeutically have fixed. Let's have a look at the story here. Public speaking fear, the saber-toothed tiger in the storm. If we go right back to the great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents that used to go around hunting for food, then just imagine a scene where that particular person from your distant ancestry is out looking for food. They see a baby saber-toothed tiger and they say, that's lunch. As they go near it to spear it, mother saber-toothed tiger appears on the scene, and now your ancestor's saying, now I'm lunch. So they race to a nearest tree. They're up that tree, scampering up, and they're getting rid of the tiger attacking by simply poking the spear until the tiger says there's an easier lunch somewhere else. The person's escaped. But what's also happened is they've imprinted into their brain a mechanism for escaping in future that's fully automatic and acts before they're even conscious of it. So next time they go out hunting and they see a tiger, they could be right beside a crack in a brick wall, or let's say a stone wall, and they get in through the stone and the tiger can't get in, and they'd be safe. But no, even though they might be a metre from that wall, over here, 30 metres away is a tree, and that tree they're automatically heading to, and they become lunch. In the public speaking world, exactly the same thing happens. You get up to give a speech, maybe standing behind the counter, delivering the speech, it's going well, something happens, maybe someone laughs at the wrong time, you get very, very nervous and shaky. So you start grabbing the sides and crossing your legs, and you're hoping the speech would finish. At the end, you get a rouse of applause and a standing ovation. And guess what? Next time they ask you to do a public speech, you go into fear factor. Why? Because your brain in the hypothalamic system, in the limbic system, has recorded one thing. You survived that speech by getting incredibly nervous. And even though logic says you did well, and you got a standing ovation, your brain says, yes, that's because you went through the nervous phase of survival, and it will repeat it every time. So that's the psychology of it. Let's move on. Info can really help. So let's talk about some information about how to put together a speech, and I'll try and wrap this up in about 10 or 15 minutes. So we've got 10 minutes to talk about psychology and NLP of presentation. And by the way, after this event, just so you know, I've given 3 digital products to the organisers. One of them is about enhancing productivity, whether it be in sport or in public speaking. It's an audio program. Another one is called How to Become a World-Class Consultant and Service Provider. That used to sell on the internet for $1,500, but everybody in here, you get a copy for yourself for free, and you can distribute it throughout your organisations to help lift the management, sales, and leadership ability. So that'll come through from the organisers after the event. So the introduction has 2 purposes in a speech. Purpose number 1 is to engage the audience. But purpose number 2, if you have a fear or a concern about speaking, is to relax you and make you feel comfortable. So the secret is to develop one that works without fail for you every time. And they fit into a number of categories. Relevant quotation, humour, something that connects with the audience. And for me, it was just connecting with cricket for you on this particular occasion. A hook question, I'll demonstrate these in a minute. An intriguing slide, and I try to use slides that are different for these types of presentation for an NLP reason that I'll explain later. A current news piece, and the use of an old reliable formula. Let's look at those one by one, and I've hit the wrong thing yet again. There's an old Indian statement, at least it's reputed to be credited to an Indian person. I don't know the person's name. It says, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. If we convert that into our presentation topic here, I would say the best time to have learned to be comfortable giving a public presentation was when you're a child. The second best time is now. So let's see if we can help you move towards the now and improve. One of the ways I said that you could introduce was use a bit of humour. So given that we have an international audience, I thought of something that happened for me once internationally. I was giving a presentation in Indonesia, in Jakarta. A third of the audience spoke good English, but 2/3 were Bahasa only, Indonesian language. And the interesting thing was that we had to do with translation, not the earphones where it gets translated at the same time you're speaking, but what they call serial translation or linear. So I'd say 10 words, and then this Indonesian university professor, about 4'10" tall, she would then describe it or translate it into Bahasa. And it was slow, and I thought, God, this is a boring way to do a presentation. So I thought, I might throw a bit of humour into this and see if I can lighten it up. So I told a bit of a story, and we'll talk a little bit about humour in a minute. I told a story, and the 30% of people in the audience who spoke English, there was a light murmur of laughter through the audience. She translated it, and the audience went wild. I thought, wow, this humour works better with the Indonesians than it does with the English speakers. So I kept going for 40 minutes, and then all of a sudden I probably told 3 or 4 stories, and every time they went berserk with the humour, it just encouraged me to use more. At lunch, I couldn't help it. I went to Professor Elizabeth and I said, Professor Elizabeth, you are absolutely amazing. Not only you can translate in a split second from English to Bahasa, you get the context of the humour, you get the timing of the humour, you deliver it perfectly and you make me look good. Thank you so much. And I wasn't a professor then. She looked at me and said, oh, Mr. Allen, they wouldn't get your humour. I just told them, he told a joke, please laugh really loudly. So context for humour is incredibly important. Don't tell jokes. People have heard them before. Find something about your family, something about your work, some experience you've had, something that just relates to the group. They don't have to laugh loudly. They just have to smile, and you've got them engaged. Seinfeld made a career out of making people smile rather than laugh loudly. He's a genius at it. Here's another way to introduce. Would you like to know why I think India will win the right to the 2036 Olympic Games? Brisbane, where I come from now, has got 2032. Who thinks India will win the 236? Who's hoping India will win? Yeah, anyone in property development would be crazy not to. The reason I think they'll win is I think in the Middle East there's just too much uncertainty at the moment, and these people have to plan well in advance with the Middle East region generally. Qatar's done things already and proved they can do it very well. Saudi's opening up, and they're your 2 big competitors very quickly. But I honestly believe India's going to win. I also happen to know some of the people are already working on a stadium for you, which could be the Olympic Stadium. We're getting a nod here, so I'm presuming we've got people from government here who know what's happening. So that's an example of me connecting with the audience by asking a question which relates to their industry on which I can have an opinion and knowledge and be justified in that. So you could use that approach in your start. Here's another one, and this could be just to engage you as property people. Are you aware of some of the key differences between the property industry in Australia and India? You have your problems, but you've generally got stable and growth. Mr. Mishner talked about that yesterday. And by the way, you don't need to re-look at this video of this presentation I'm giving to pick up on how to use and be well at public speaking. If you want to learn by practical public speaking, watch Mr. Dandapani's presentation from yesterday and Mr. Mishner's. They were master classes in 2 different styles of presentation. I don't know whether they're here or not, but they were master classes. You've got a guy who's presenting from Axis Capital, very detailed numbers, and not throwing up numbers that people can't read from the back of the room, just throwing up charts. He wasn't behind here reading every word. He was moving like I am. He knew every bit of the numbers and figures behind what he was talking about, and he was absolutely engaging and really knew how to use the stage for a technical presentation. Mr. Gandapani came on and spoke about meaningful productivity. What a brilliant title for a group of business people who would not be interested. His use of slides was absolutely spot on. His vocal tones and phrasing were incredible, and his messages were outstanding. I was totally riveted by both of them. If you missed either of those presentations, what I'm doing for you is lightweight compared to the experience you get from your own countrymen. I encourage you to watch those videos. Property news in Australia. Going berserk. We've got $180 billion worth of projects to be done by 2040 in Queensland alone. Great, eh? Problem is, we've got the biggest rate of companies going broke in the construction industry ever. Simply because supply chain problems after COVID. Secondly, builders with bad balance sheets going broke left, right and centre. Unions going berserk to the point now that agreements that were supposed to give us productivity has resulted in 30 to 40% cost overruns and 25 to 30% reductions in productivity. Housing concerns. We have mega problems in a country that's just full of opportunities. You're going along pretty well and stable. So were we 4 years ago. Make sure you listen to the speakers here so you don't go down our path. So that's another introduction type I can use in anything. And the last one is just a proven strategy. If you're not sure about it and you want to feel safe, it's an old thing that says you get in front of the audience and say, let me tell you what I'm going to tell you today. Then you tell them what you're going to tell them. And then you tell them what you told them. That's the old Toastmasters thing. Today I'm going to speak about 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. I've just talked to you about this, this, this. You saw a bit of it in the previous thing. It was masterfully done by the adjudicator, the moderator, who said, this is what we're going to talk about. We'll whack it up on the slides. And then he did it and said, let me summarise what we just did. So obviously it's not mine because he hadn't heard me speak before, but anyway. So now let's go forward a bit and talk a little bit about the delivery phase, and I'm hoping still to end up with 5 minutes on the psychology. This is pretty straightforward. You want to deal with nerves and be a good speaker, do what Mr. Missioner did. Speak about what you know. If you're asked to speak about what you don't know, never come up front and say, I know nothing about this, I was just asked to speak about it. But you might want to have substantial notes. Don't ever, if you can avoid it, and this is a bit of psychology here, stand behind a platform. Standing behind platforms is for two groups of people. One, MCs, because they've got so much stuff to do. And you will notice anyway, they're remembering a lot of it, just taking a glance. Very, very fantastic job being done. And government people have to say stuff according to policy because the press is probably going to pick them up on everything. If you stand behind here, the people on the platform with the video will love you because they sit the camera up and they say, time for coffee, because you're not going to move. Whereas if you're moving around like this, they've got to scan the camera. And if you really want to have a bit of fun on stage, just run across to the other side of the stage. And they've got, good job, by the way, in not having copy. They followed it straight away. So try and stay in a range. My suggestion would be, pretty near to the rostrum, because things are normally set up for that from a production perspective. As you're probably aware, these things here are teleprompters. Now, they're great if you have to do a word-by-word presentation of the type we mentioned before. So with those, you can actually stand out here and still be using them. The problem with them, and it's only one problem, it's better than reading off the document. Because if you have to read off the document, you need to be looking up and down, and then you lose your place. You just got to be careful with teleprompters that you don't look like you're giving a speech while watching a tennis match. So just get used to using them. Stagecraft is another aspect of it. We speak to the audience and not to the notes. The notes are there, as Mr. Misra did yesterday. Beautiful notes, very complicated, and yet he spoke to them to simplify them so well. Now, with an audience like this, you need to be scanning as I am, but another stagecraft technique would be, and I'm not doing this to wind up the video, guys, to stand at one point of the stage, and this is particularly the case if you've got an aisle down the middle of the audience, a psychology thing, because it splits the audience. So if you've got an aisle down the middle, stand at this side of the stage and address the audience in the distance for 60% of the time, or up to 2/3. And the other time, address the third ear, because they've got you engaged through proximity. They don't. And then find an excuse to go across the stage, not just I want to go for a stroll. Ask yourself the question, what do you think about this? And you ask the question, and you point to someone in the audience and move across and say, that's a fascinating question. I can see you're thinking about it. In fact, a lot of people are thinking about the question. Be interesting to know your answer in the break. So I've created a reason to walk across the stage, and now I spend 1/3 talking to this group and 2/3 talking to that group. I've been here mainly in the middle looking both directions because there's no split down the middle. But that psychology, that NLP of connecting groups that aren't connected is very important. Notice how you never go to the opera and see an aisle down the middle? The aisles are on the side for big theatre performances. Why? Because they know the importance of keeping the audience together to get the best reaction psychology. Next, 3 to 5 points. I'll come to NLP in a moment. 3 points for half an hour, 5 points for 45 minutes to an hour. A great way to present without nerves, by the way, is if you're really worried about it, is you just get someone who knows how to interview and you don't give a presentation. You just say, I've got a lot of knowledge, but I'm scared on stage. You set the seats up facing each other so you don't have to look at the audience and you have someone interview you. I've done that with numerous people during my speaking career. I represented Australia in public speaking once, and I've done a lot of work around the world in it. And that can take someone who's absolutely scared stiff of speaking and allow them to speak productively. Interesting visuals. I'm interested in photography. I didn't take all those photos, but most of those photos were picked to make a point. For example, the tree photo, when I talked about if you planted a tree, it was a single tree reflected, and it was all black and grey. And it was there to put a single message over. We're talking about a tree, I don't want distractions. But there are actually two trees, the trees and the reflection. So the first tree was subconsciously to represent you could have done it when you were a kid. And the second tree was to say, but it's not too late to start now. So everything you choose has a secondary subconscious meaning if you're going to get into NLP. So I've got 5 minutes and 47 seconds to introduce neuro-linguistic programming to you. Neuro means the nervous system. Linguistic is about the effect of language on the nervous system. And programming is how the things we experience through our senses are recorded in our mind to affect us in the future. And NLP is about using language that can really relax people and have an effect on them. In sales, it's important. So if you're dealing with someone in a sales presentation and they come in and say, tell me why you want this approval, for example. Let's say it's about an approval presentation. And you go back and say, well, we feel really strongly about this and we'd like to show you some slides. You've just missed, they'll understand what you're saying, but you've just missed the opportunity for the most incredible psychological persuasion. Why? Because they said, tell me about it, and you went straight to how you feel about it, which is what we call a kinesthetic reaction to feelings, like touch and sense. And then you say, let me show you, which is a visual one. If they say tell, and you want to show, you have to do a transition. You say, I'd love to tell you about it, but I think I could explain it better if I also showed you some visual. What would you prefer, just to talk about it or see the visuals so you can get a picture of what we're talking about? Notice that phrase, so you can get a picture of what we're talking about. It's what I want to do combined with what they want to do. That is incredibly persuasive. And if they say, no, I just want to hear about it, I've only got 3 minutes, and the best thing is say, we'll send you the photos later, and then you just go with them on the talking thing. So the three main senses we deal with in NLP and psychology for speaking or presenting or negotiating is the visual sense, showing, giving them a visual idea. The auditory sense, which is tones of voice. And if it's a purely auditory person, you'll pick them easily because auditory people speak more slowly than visual people. Visual people speak very quickly compared to auditory people. So radio announcers tend to have that deep, gravelly voice. They come and they breathe down deeper in their diaphragm. Visual people breathe higher in their chest, okay? Now, it's really, really important that you understand how to pick these signs. You won't get it just from this presentation, but to learn the signs is important. So you hear someone speaking very deeply, breathing deeply in their chest, not because there's a medical problem, you can be pretty sure they're going to be auditory and you need to be able to switch to that sort of language very quickly. Let me give you an example of NLP to close off, because there's nowhere in the world we're going to be able to cover it in depth. I'm just hoping you've picked a few messages up about its importance. In fact, I've got an ebook called NLP Skills for Business. If Mr. Bhatia, the organizer, gets in touch with me, I'll send him a link to that and you can all have a copy of that as well after the effect. So had I come out here, or even now at this part, and just stood here and said, even at the start, let's imagine we're just starting. I think I know what you're thinking. And it's really good to think like that. Because to imagine what an Australian from thousands of kilometres away could provide for an Indian audience that would be really helpful to them means you don't want to waste time and energy in investing in things that are a waste of time. And that means you're interested in productivity, efficiency, and effectiveness. And only the best of people are really successful if they focus on those things. Now, while I was saying that, if I looked around the room, and if you did, you see people nodding. There's an old phrase in psychology. If you get people to agree with you 3 to 4 times on what you tell them, then they're more likely to be open to what you say after, even though they otherwise might have disagreed with you more openly. So what I did is I said, in neurolinguistic terms, I think I know what you're thinking. Now, immediately there'd be at least half this audience, if not 80%, saying, you've got to be kidding, man. You wouldn't have a clue what I'm thinking. But just about the time you said that, and I said, and it's good to think that way. And that immediately kills the doubt. Now you want to find out why it's good to think that way. I said, because if you're wondering why an Australian can deliver anything for an Indian audience that's going to help you, you're nodding as I say it, particularly in the world of efficiency, etc., and that means greater productivity and all that sort of stuff. I've got you nodding to everything I said, but every one of those phrases fits one of 17 neuro-linguistic language patterns that are key to learning how to persuade people. Have a read of the ebook when I send it to you. It's a very, very powerful tool for public speaking. It's a very, very powerful tool for negotiation. It's a very, very powerful tool for just about anything to do with business. My family are always into me. I studied this with the founder of it in America, a guy called Richard Bandler, and I'm accredited at master's level and at teaching it, and I use it every day. I try not to, but it's become part of who I am. So I have people in the office saying to me, are you using that stuff on us again? And I go, no, but I probably am, because it's part of me. And I hope what I had here today becomes part of you and your business. I thank you very much for inviting me. It's right on 0, which means I'm finished. And now I'm probably the curtain raiser to someone else. So I'm out of here. Thanks very much for your attention. The MC didn't expect someone to finish on time, so she's running late. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Alan. I have made such a fast sprint, though. I was listening to everything he said. Alan, if you had to mark me on a scale of 1 to 10, what would I get?
At least 12.
Okay, don't answer that. Oh, you said 12. Yay, I got 12. All right.
I am speaking about her MC rights as well, not just her Bollywood presentation.
Oh my God, I call Bollywood. Okay. Well, I mean, it was absolutely delightful listening to you today, as I'm sure the audience enjoyed it. I'm sure you picked up some pearls of wisdom. Can I please invite Deepak Goradia and Dhaval Ajmera on stage, please, to personally thank Alan for such a valuable session. Here they are. Oh. Thank you, Alan. Can we have a round of applause for this wonderful mastery of a session? When such accomplished people give you footnotes on what to do and how to present and how to be a good public speaker and influence people, you sit up and listen and you take notes. So thank you. This was extremely valuable. Thank you, gentlemen.